Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Thank you for joining me wherever you are joining me. Rate the show, comment, agree, disagree, but whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel, you know what to do. Make sure you look down at the ticker. I am looking for sponsors currently for an event that I am planning to put on in February, late February. If you're interested, I'd love for you to link up with me. It was a fantastic college football playoff championship yesterday. It was fantastic for all of the reasons that college football is fantastic. The two best teams in the country duking it out. Obviously, in every one of these games, it seems like somebody gets injured that sways the balance. Last night was no exception because when Jameson Williams went down, on top of already being without Mechie for Alabama, they were now down their top two wide receivers. And while people will be quick to say, well, it's Alabama, they have a bunch of, 5-star guys or whatever have a bunch of talent at wide receiver. The truth is, if guys are not used to playing a ton, if they're not used to those reps, then it doesn't matter whether they're a 5-star or a walk-on, they're going to perform a little shaky. And you saw that when those receivers came in, the routes weren't as crisp. The timing with the quarterback wasn't where it needs to be at. Some really, really, really costly drops. Some times where guys, it was a time in the end of the game where the receiver went for the ball with one hand instead of two. So losing those top two wide receivers in this game was huge. I felt like they might be able to survive with one, but when they lost the other one, I felt like it was going to be an uphill battle. Georgia came out and played their butts off. The defense played well in the red zone for the most part. I thought there were two drop passes that would have been touchdowns, but they played their butt off in the red zone for the most part. They didn't really play well anywhere else. Alabama moved the ball up and down the field. And to Georgia's credit, they were able to block out the noise. They were able to block out all of the idiots that kept sitting there talking about, oh, you got all of these 5-star quarterbacks on the bench. Why don't you play them? Well, because they know that there's no difference going to be had. Let me tell you guys how football works for people who don't know. And for those that do know, you'll understand what I'm saying. If you're going to go with a JT Barrett, then you go with JT Barrett from the beginning. Because the style that JT Barrett plays is not the style that Stetson Bennett plays. They're not going to win the same way. And so once they have dialed in on the things that Stetson Bennett is doing, if you go to JT Daniels, it only gets worse. Stetson Bennett was running for his life for most of the game. Stetson Bennett didn't have a lot of time to throw. Stetson Bennett made a few really, really awesome throws, but they were throws under duress most of the time. JT Daniels would have been sacked in those situations. JT Daniels would have been sacked. He would have thrown interceptions. Why? He hasn't been playing. He hasn't had the reps. He's not out there. People kept on calling for him as if like they had Deshaun Watson sitting on the bench. No, you got JT Daniels on the bench. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to break the news to you, but there are two types of quarterbacks that transfer in this world that we're in now. The JT Daniels are not the move. JT Daniels should never be the starting quarterback at Georgia, to be honest with you. You've seen the blueprint. You know what works. And what works is not JT Daniels. If Stetson Bennett wants to come back for another year and run it back, let him come back for another year and run it back. I don't think he should. I think he should ride off into the sunset. That's just me. But man, so many of you guys were out there bashing Stetson Bennett and trying to hide behind, well, they got to do what's best for the team. Hide him like Stetson Bennett didn't win all of those games. Like he wasn't the starting quarterback for all those games. At the beginning of the year, it was like, well, Stetson Bennett's playing well. Well, guess what? Once they decided to stick with that guy, it was going to be that guy a bust. You don't bring on the freshman who's tall and athletic with a great head of hair. You let that guy wait his turn. Now, this is what I will say about Georgia, something that'll be for another day probably. We're going to have to figure out whether or not Georgia can actually develop a quarterback. Because Stetson Bennett developed himself. Stetson Bennett went away, played ball, did his thing, then came back to Stetson Bennett that we've seen. It seems as if, it may not actually be the truth, but it seems as if every big 5-star, 4-star quarterback that has come through the University of Georgia has had trouble being developed. Every quarterback that's come through the University of Georgia, especially during the Kirby Smart era, has had trouble being developed. Someone's going to have to figure this out at some point. I don't know what it is. But even as great as the national championship game was, and as good a story as Stetson Bennett's story is, and people making the jokes that are not jokes, they're really true story, that Disney's already working on the script for the Stetson Bennett story. Let's hope they are, and let's hope it's better than the Kurt Warner movie, which is atrocious. It's the worst sports movie I've ever seen. Worse than some of those Christian sports movies that I see, which I actually kind of enjoy sometimes. It's worse than those. I digress. Even all of that wasn't enough to take the attention away from what they call Black Monday, which, by the way, is a joke. Black Monday is a joke. Oh, these coaches lose their jobs, and I feel bad for the coaches. I feel bad for the assistant coaches. You feel bad for the coaches and the assistant coaches, which I do. But you don't feel bad for the 1,000 football players that all get cut at the beginning of the year? People act as if these coaches are never going to find another job. They just might not find a job as good as the NFL job they have, but they're going to find another job as a coach. Some of those players that get cut at the beginning of the season will never play football again, and they got to figure out what to do with their life. Not, oh, I may have to take a job at a college until a buddy gets a job in the NFL that knows me until something comes open. Nope, none of that. I'm going to have to find another line of work for the 1,000 people that are getting cut, as opposed to the teams or the 100. But they give it a name. I mean, did you guys forget that you can coach until you die? You can coach till you die. You can't play football till you die. And even if you could, they won't let you unless you're Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning. Unless you're a quarterback, they're not going to let you play forever. They're going to get you out of there at some point. So this idea of Black Monday, where let's feel bad for all of the coaches that lost their job, yeah, okay. But let's do that after we feel really, really awful for all of the players that lost their job at the beginning of the season. We act like that's not a big deal. We just go on about our business as if that doesn't matter. It's really interesting. Like we're really corny in that way. Bunch of players lose their job, nobody blinks. Bunch of coaches lose their job, or a bunch of 1,000 players lose their job, nobody blinks. A few coaches lose their job and people go, oh my God, that's so awful. It's part of the game. It's a cold part of the game, especially when you consider that some of these guys don't deserve to lose their job. When you consider that some of these guys are out here getting it done and yet still losing their job, that it frustrates you. In particular, this thing that's going on in Miami, where Miami decided that they were going to move on from their starting quarter. I mean, from their coach. So now Brian Flores is out of a job, and I don't know why. I don't know why. I can't make it make sense. I was trying all of yesterday when I heard the news to figure out exactly why Brian Flores would lose his job. As things started to come out, I was trying to figure out why Brian Flores would lose his job. I can't figure it out. We all know, we just forget it, but consistency wins in sports. Consistency from the owner all the way down to the players. That's what wins in sports. From the top to the bottom, consistency. Teams who constantly turn over their coaches tend to not be very good teams. So when you find a great leader, when you find someone who's a good leader as a head coach, even if they have deficiencies, you figure them out and you keep moving the thing forward because you have a great leader. And yet, everybody has fallen in love with the let me go find the next great offensive innovator out there so I can bring them in. Well, you know what? Let's talk spicy, right? Let's call it what it is. Let's go out and find the next great young white wonderkin, whether they're on offense or defense, and let's bring him in. Because that's all we see getting these opportunities on a regular basis. Brian Flores, for you guys that don't know, Brian Flores went 5-11 in his first season with Miami. He went 5-11. The next year went 10-6 and didn't make the playoffs. They were second in the AFC East, but because records were so good last year from some teams in the AFC, they did not make the playoffs. This year, they go 9-8. Now, between last year, when they drafted their starting quarterback, and this year, they have been without a starting quarterback half of that time. They've had to rely on backups who are journeymen, conservative, or YOLO quarterbacks. They've had to do all of that in that time frame, and nobody respecting the fact that this is what they're dealing with. Nobody respecting the fact that, hey, we don't have a quarterback that's consistently here. We don't have a running game because our GM clearly doesn't show value or think that the position is a value need. So we don't have a running back that's good. We don't have an offensive line that's great because the GM has made poor decisions. And so now we leave our head coach, who's a defensive guy, to figure it out. And in those 2 years, 10 wins, 9 wins. He's out of a job. Why? First speculation is, oh, well, they want to go after Harbaugh. And then quickly it comes out, oh, no, this has nothing to do with Harbaugh. This has everything to do with the relationship between the head coach and the GM and the starting quarterback. This has everything to do with the relationship between the head coach, the GM, and the starting quarterback. Okay, so let's review. The starting quarterback that the GM brought, that the head coach probably wasn't that sold on. Okay, that's cool. It's an issue. Let's say it's an issue. You have a great leader. You get in a room, you sit down, and you work it out. Because first we were told it's because Jim Harbaugh is available. Then we find out, nope, Jim Harbaugh's not coming. Then we hear about the fact that there was some relationship issues. Well, every relationship that has issues don't have to end in divorce. Why do we have to be so perfect as Black head coaches in this society in order to keep our jobs? Why are we not allowed to learn on the job? Why can't we learn from mistakes outside of Mike Tomlin? What Mike Tomlin, who's learning on the job? Who gets the opportunity to come back? Raheem Morris was the head coach of the Buccaneers. They, at a young age, they purposely gave that man no help. Didn't bring in free agents, put a bunch of rookies out there. That man took that team to 10 wins, lost his job the next year. They brought in a guy that they thought was going to be all the world, let him spend all the money in the world. He was gone within a year. Maybe 2, I forget right now, maybe 2 years. Gone. So now, several years later, almost 10 years later, he's been kicking around as an assistant coach in the NFL, and we have not even heard his name mentioned for another job. He took over in Atlanta when they fired Dan Quinn, righted the ship. They said, hey, we need you on offense. He goes and works with the offense. Offense gets better. Hey, we need you on defense. He goes and works with the defense. Defense gets better. He is a quality coach, and yet nothing. Crickets. Nothing about this man getting another opportunity, another bite at the apple. Meanwhile, coaches who have failed miserably have been allowed opportunity after opportunity. David Culley and what he did with Houston this year is nothing short of amazing. No starting quarterback. The quarterback they brought in to replace him gets hurt. Then they start Davis Mills. A bunch of running backs who are on the back ends of their careers. A number one wide receiver who's been bounced around. Like, What are we talking about here?
On the back end of their career.
What are we talking about here? We got to make it make sense, right? We got to make it make sense. If David Culley can't keep his job, if they're going to move on from David Culley, then who's safe? Nobody should be safe, really, right? So if David Culley is going to lose his job or has the potential to lose his job, why are we not talking about Aranda? Why is Aranda safe? Why is it that somebody like Jim Caldwell, who's had success after success of winning, just going out and winning, maybe not winning Super Bowls because only one coach is consistently doing that, but going out and winning, why is it that man hasn't been afforded another opportunity? And if one of you people tell me health again, I swear to God. Oh, well, his health isn't good. Let that man tell us that. You know what the sad part is? These guys lose their jobs. They bring in somebody else to do the job. They perform worse or just as good, and they're praised for it. Like what's going on with the Chargers. Oh, the Chargers are in good hands. How? They're worse. Why, you say, are they worse? Because all of their people are healthy and the record stayed the same. If the record is this with unhealthy players and then players come back and they're healthy and you have the same record, that means you're actually worse. The sad part is that we'll never really understand what happened from Brian Flores' side. Why? Because he can't say anything. He can't talk. Why can't he talk? Because if he says something, if he tells the truth, right? If he tells the truth, then what are we going to do? Or what are they going to do? They're going to go, oh, well, he's talking. He can't keep the secrets in the locker room. So now we can't bring him in as a coach. They're going to ostracize him. If he tells the truth, then it's going to work negatively against him possibly getting another job. I'll say this for you, Miami. I've never been a Dolphins fan, but I will definitely not root for anything you guys do. Because the truth be told, I'm not the most huge Tua fan, but I'm a fan of giving people the opportunity that's fair. But I wasn't a huge Tua fan. It would not have been the way in which I went. I was on record as saying, I'm not really going to take Tua with that. I'm going to go another route. But unless this man has some type of power that I'm not aware of, the Dolphins went out and drafted Tua. Then the Dolphins tried to trade for another quarterback in the midst of Tua struggling. Didn't get that done. Don't have an adequate offensive line. Didn't have an adequate running back until they got Duke Johnson out of mothballs. People kept saying, oh, well, they can't run the ball because of the offensive line. And then they went out and got a real running back, and all of a sudden they could run the ball. It's not lost on me, right? All of these are GM decisions, and yet the head coach lost his job. I haven't even talked about, not ad nauseum, how many coaches are rolling around here with terrible records that have not been fired. Vic Fangio got fired in Denver, but that's because he was only a half coach anyway. They were making decisions for him on his coaching staff when he first got there. You're not going to be long for the job when they hire you and they don't trust you to make offensive coaching decisions. Vic Fangio was going to be a lame duck because they have to have somebody in Denver to blame for the terrible job that they've done in the front office identifying quarterback talent. Anthony Lynn goes from the head job with the Chargers, fired because they want to bring in an offensive mind, but then they go out and hire a defensive coach. Then Lynn goes to the Lions. The Lions are struggling. Why? Because they don't have a ton of talent, because they're not a good organization, and because the head coach is really more suited to be a tight ends coach or a special teams coordinator than a head coach. So he goes there as the offensive coordinator. A few games in, gets stripped of his offensive coordinator duty for a guy who's never called plays and never actually game planned an offense. The head coach. So now he's trying to learn how to be a head coach and learn how to be an offensive coordinator on the job. Why is he not on the hot seat? I would seriously consider making changes in Detroit. I would seriously consider making changes. Not seriously. I would make changes. There's no beating around the bush. I said I wasn't going to be going for 30 minutes, but guess what? This is ridiculous. If Brian Flores is going to lose his job, Detroit, you need a new coach. New York Giants, you need a new coach. New York Jets, you need a new coach. Immediately. If Brian Flores is going to lose his job, if that guy is going to lose his job, Chargers, you need a new coach. I mean, let's keep it a buck. If you're going to get Brian Flores out of there after a 10-win season and a 9-win season where they're building something, if he's got to go, then those other guys got to go too. I'm still waiting to hear the name Byron Leftwich up for a job. I'm still waiting to hear the name Eric Bieniemy up for a job. I'm still waiting to hear the names, because all I'm hearing out there are the same old rinse, wash, repeat, young offensive innovators that don't look anything like me out there. Those are the people who get a job. Not people like me. Those offensive innovators, quote unquote, they're the ones that are getting the job. I don't understand it. I can't make it make sense. What does Brian Flores have to do better? Somewhere somebody's out there saying, well, it's all about relationships. He's got to be able to build a better relationship with the GM. Well, excuse me, but if he doesn't have a good relationship with the GM, can't they still be amicable in their jobs? Can't they still work? Can't they still work? You don't have to like somebody in order to work together. If I've got a quality head coach, I don't have to like you. You're just good at your job. Do your job. It's not like he's making personnel decisions. If he was, I'm pretty sure he's not taking Tua. That's just my gut reaction. But if he's the personnel guy, I don't think Tua's his kind of guy. I think Jalen Hurts is his kind of guy. And I think that you could have seen Miami get Jalen Hurts in the second round had they have not taken Tua in the first. But that's hindsight, right? That's hindsight. What we have here is a situation where these coaches don't know how to keep their jobs. They don't know how to keep their jobs. How many more years does Pete Carroll get in Seattle before they finally say, hey, listen, the milk's gone bad. It's time to do something different. How many more times do we have to see Cliff Kingsbury not take a bunch of talent on a team to the playoffs? I mean, come on, man. The guys who are obvious to get fired, they got fired. Matt Nagy, he's gone. Fangio, he's gone. You put those two next to Brian Flores, and you go, one of these things is doing their own. One of these kids is doing their own thing. One of these things just don't belong. That's Brian Flores. That's why when he hit the coaching, he's already one of the top candidates because it doesn't make any sense. Man, it's going to be really hard for me not to mock Miami next year every time they lose. Every time there's a mismanagement, every time there's something that goes wrong, it's going to be extremely hard for me to for me to not mock the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to apologize to my Dolphins friends and followers and everything right now. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I am going to be relentless. You better hope you get this hire right. You better hope that whomever they bring in is able to take what Brian Flores built. You better hope he's able to take what Brian Flores built and add on to it. If he's not able to take what Brian Flores built and add on to it, if they take a step back, it's going to be a problem. And I'm going to be right there laughing. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Thank you for joining me. We do this thing a few times a week. Rate the show, comment, agree, disagree. Whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel, you know what to do. Congratulations again to Stetson Bennett and the Georgia Bulldogs. Until next time, peace.